Let's just look real quick at Romans chapter 8, verse 28. Romans 8, 28. And we read here, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. Now, what does this verse not say? It does not say that only some things work out for good. It says what? All things work for good. For everybody in the world? Is that what it says? What does it say? The second part says what? To those who are called according to His purpose. If we will live our lives according to God's law, according to His word, according to Him living inside of us, then anything that happens to us, God will overrule for good. Now you think about that, that's an amazing promise. It's an amazing promise because if all you have to do is go and look at the news or go look at television and what's going on to see that there's a lot of bad in this world. A lot of bad things happening, a lot of bad in this world. But here, God says in His word that if you believe in me, if you will trust me, if you will put me first, then everything that happens to you, it will turn out for good and for God's glory. Now, number 5, the fifth assumption here, we find here human problems can be purely psychological in nature. Human problems can be purely psychological in nature, unrelated to any spiritual or physical condition. So modern psychologists will say human problems can be purely psychological in nature, unrelated to any spiritual or physical condition. Now here, though, you got to understand something about the word psychology, the etymology of psychology. The word psychology is made up of two words, okay? The first word comes from the Greek word for psyche, which means soul or life, and ology, which means the study of. Now, so psychology is the study of the soul. The study of the soul. Now, if you think about the soul, if you're going to go into studying what the soul is all about, what source do you want to believe? Do you want to believe science and scientists who do not have any special knowledge when it comes to anything when it comes to supernatural? Let's face it, they don't even know right now. They still don't really know how our brain works. We couldn't reproduce the brain if we tried, let alone all the complexities of all of the different mixes of our emotions inside of us. Or you'd understand who is the expert of the soul. Who is the expert of the soul? God. God is the one who formed us. God is the one who gave us life. And God is the one who can give us the answers we need for our souls. You know that before the 1700s and 1800s, do you know where people went to for soul problems? Any ideas? Yeah, they'd go to the clergy. They'd go to the clergy for their problems. In fact, you'll find the Puritans had whole manuals written in terms of helping people biblically how to deal with their problems and find help in dealing with their life. It wasn't until the late 1700s, early 1800s, with the budding, science, if you will, of psychology, where it became a place where the things of the mind were for professionals, and that didn't include men of God, men of the cloth, women of the cloth. It was only for those who had people like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung and others who had studied in depth and had come up with these scientific principles for it. But in reality, I will tell you that the Bible is truly the one source that is supernatural and can have all the answers for all that ails us and all of our soul problems. Let's look in Matthew chapter 17 and verse 20. Matthew 17 and verse 20. We read, "So Jesus said to them, 'For because of your unbelief, Well, earlier, if you look at the context, what they were trying to do is the disciples were trying to cast out a demon, and they weren't able to. You find verse 14, let's start with 14. It says, "And when they had come to the multitude," this is Matthew 17, verse 14, "a man came down to him, kneeling down to him and saying, 'Lord, have mercy on me, on my son, for he is an epileptic and suffers severely, for he often falls into the fire and often into the water.'" Now today, what will psychologists tell you is epilepsy? Is it demonic in nature? No, modern psychologists will tell us that epilepsy is a brain dysfunction that needs to be regulated by drugs. Now, but watch what's happening here in this epilepsy. Here's this child who is getting convulsions and getting thrown all over the place, okay? And just read it. So I brought him to your disciples, but they could not cure him. And then look what Jesus does. "Then Jesus answered and said, 'O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him here to me.' And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour." From that very hour. "And then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, 'Why could we not cast it out?' So Jesus said to them, 'Because of your unbelief, for assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. However, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting.'" You see, here's a very clear circumstance where if you could take modern psychologists and put them in a teleport machine, bring them back to the time of Jesus, and they saw what was going on here, no way, shape, or form would they attribute this to a spiritual problem. They would think that this was either a chemical imbalance or some kind of neurological disease or disorder, some kind of condition, maybe even saying that it was something genetic that they'd inherited. And yet, what does Jesus do? But here, Jesus casts out a demon, and it cures the child. And what does this tell us? Well, see, the thing is science in general, and this is not just psychology, but any science, cannot account for the supernatural. It's not something you can go and grab an instrument panel and just kind of plug it into the air or something and test for the supernatural. Yes, you'll have some people like today that are paranormal hunters and other things like that camp out. Like in Cornwall a while back, they had a paranormal team that came to the Cornwall jail because there's apparently some kind of spirit that lives in the Cornwall jail. And so they just camped out overnight to try to catch a glimpse of it. But this is not considered, the paranormal hunters, these ghost hunters, are not considered scientists. They're considered fringe and lunatic. When you talk about a scientist cannot touch or feel or measure the spiritual world, and so therefore they come to the conclusion that the spiritual world is just a figment of our imagination, just something that we make up, just some kind of a thing that we do, but really has no bearing on us here today. But if you look at in the here and now, but if you look at the Bible, its specialty is the spiritual. And when you look at how Jesus acted, he acted very differently, even from the people of his day, even from the spiritual leaders of his day. And when you look at, when you're talking about the spiritual things, if you take out the spiritual element out of dealing with our problems, how likely are we to find the solution to our problem? Not very likely at all.